Okay, good evening, everyone. The connection is excellent, so hopefully it stays that way. Be starting momentarily. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good evening, everyone. Last week we got cut off just as I was getting to the end. I did check to see where we were cut off, and I was almost finished the formal portion. The one thing, I'm going to just catch it up now. That last chapter was on the nutrition and elements, and there was a third section in the chapter to tie, put a conclusion on the whole section on samadhi, and it gives you the benefits of developing the samadhi. There's four. First of all, there's a benefit for subsequent development of insight when the mind is made calm, clear, and lucid. Then one can do vipassana meditation more easily and fruitfully. And then the second benefit is the development of supernormal powers, which is actually going to be the main theme of the talk today. And the third one is it leads to or entry into jhana, having some degree of mastery of jhana leads to rebirth in the Brahma world. And the final one is that once you have attained to state of stream winner or higher, that is, you are a noble one, and you also develop jhana, then you have access to entering into the state of cessation, also called Nirodha Samapatti. And it says here that it's possible to remain in that state for up to 7 days. And so it's basically putting the mind into a state of nibbana. Okay, so that concludes the section, the first section of the Suddhimagga, the first long section on tranquility meditation, on samatha meditations. We've covered the 40 meditations and in some detail, and then we go on to chapter 12, which deals with the supernormal powers, also called the iddhis, which the literal translation of iddhi is success. This chapter is a longish one, and it's a bit complicated. It treats the material from several different angles. Begins with listing the 5 kinds of direct knowledge, as sometimes called abhinyas. The first one is the supernormal powers. The second one is knowledge of divine ear, that is hearing things at a distance or being able to hear sounds from other realms. This is divine ear. The divine eye is included amongst the supernormal powers. The divine eye is like remote viewing, and also being able to see other realms, to see devas and so on. 3 is the knowledge of penetration of minds, that is telepathy. The 4th is recollection of past lives. And 5 is the knowledge of passing away and reappearance of beings. So that's the second of the Buddha's direct knowledges on this enlightenment night, was seeing beings rising and falling according to their karma. Then there's a section talking about the 10 kinds, or before we get to that, it talks about the prerequisite for developing supernormal powers is mastery of the jhanas in 14 ways. So this sets a very high bar. It's not just being able to enter jhana, it sets a mastery of jhana in 14 ways. And that includes going up and down the kasinas in forward and reverse order, going up and down the jhanas, first, second, third, fourth, in forward and reverse order, entering into any chosen jhana or kasina, and so on. So it's complete mastery of these techniques, so that it becomes absolutely easy, and then the mind can open up to developing supernormal powers. Then there's a kind of interesting list of defining that term iddhi, meaning success. It talks about 10 kinds of success. The first one is success by resolve, which means that wielding various supernormal powers, giving example of multiplication of bodies. You make the resolve, let there be many, and the body multiplies. Of course, you have to have that develop the jhanas and all those power. And there's success as transformation, which means that you can transform your body and become, take the form of an animal or a dewa or another human being and so on. This was a power exercised, for example, by Devadatta in one of the stories, and actually Mara has this power. He's in one of the stories, he transformed himself into the appearance of the Buddha to mislead someone. Then there's the success of as the mind-made body, which means that, like astral projection, being able to create a ethereal form that then is complete in every faculty and can travel around and so on. Then there is what's called success by intervention of knowledge, and there's several stories to illustrate this given here. And this is something in this chapter that could be make it kind of entertaining to read, because it's interspersed with a lot of stories about various bhikkhus exercising powers and so on. But intervention by knowledge means someone who has got the prerequisites to become an arahant, and they died without attaining arahantship, but they're ready, and they're reborn, and they have knowledge of the 3 characteristics and so on. And then they are saved miraculously from various dangers so that they can continue on. One of these stories, I'll just give it in brief as an example. There's actually 3 of these stories. There's a young boy who was, while he was still an infant, through the negligence of his nurse, he fell into the stream and was swallowed by a fish. But the fish was almost immediately caught by a fisherman, and when the fisherman was cleaning the fish, he took the infant whole out of the belly and saved his life. Success by intervention of concentration. And again, there's several stories here. This is someone who has mastery of jhana, and then they're able to save themselves from some serious danger by entering jhana And it gives, again, several stories about this. One of them was a monk, the elder Sanjiva, who was in Nirodha Samapatti, the attainment of cessation, and cowherds came and saw him sitting there, and they thought he was dead, so they tried to cremate him, and he was not burned because of his concentration powers. You know, the fire went out and he was still sitting there unscathed. Number 6 is the Noble One's success. This is the power of arahants to control their perception and to perceive the repulsive in the lovely and the lovely in the repulsive. They perceive things as they choose. Success born as Kama. Now this we're getting to a little different ones here. Success born of Kama result. And the example is given is the power of flight. A bird has the power of flight, not through developing psychic powers, but by their karma of being born a bird. So whereas for a human, levitation or the power of flight would be considered a supernormal power, for a bird it's natural, it's a result of karma. The next one, number 8, is similar. It's success of merit. And it gives the example of a wheel-turning monarch who can fly through the air on his horse or his elephant because of his great merit. It also gives some other examples of persons of great merit that have miraculous abilities or possessions, such as householder Jotaka, who was extremely wealthy, and he had a crystal palace that appeared, it sprang into existence solely from the power of his merit. And this is how palaces of the Devas appear, actually. They just arise. They're not built, they just appear due to karma. Then there's number 9 is success through the sciences. I think what probably, I haven't tried to find it, but I think what's probably being translated by Nyanamoli as sciences is probably vidya, or knowledges. And it gives the example of masters of the sciences, which we would probably call magicians, who, having pronounced their scientific spells, travel through the air, and they show an elephant in space, etc. They show a manifold array. So this isn't, strictly speaking, a supernormal power. It's learning secret mantras and so on, and being able to exercise powers in that way. So I wonder if we could actually extend this into modern times, as we have we can do many things that would be classed as supernormal powers to the ancients, but we do it by means of technology. We fly through the air, we communicate over great distances, and so on. And the final one is the mundane one. Success in the sense of succeeding due to right exertion applied here and there. And it gives the example as following a trade, such as making a cart, or medical work, or learning the Vedas, etc. You know, any kind of task is succeeded by the application of effort. Then we get into the supernormal powers per se, and this is probably the longest section in the chapter, and it is interspersed with many stories to give examples of monks and who exercised these powers in ancient times. The first one is multiplication of bodies. That is, one can having been one, one becomes many. You make duplicates of yourself, which I thought that would be a very handy power to develop for firewood season. But never mind. And then there's the power to appear and vanish. And there's a long digression attached to this, describing the Buddha's time that he spent in Tawatingsa heaven, descent from Tawatingsa, which is a favorite theme for Buddhist art, and the story and the details of the Buddha's descent from heaven occurs in slightly different versions in several places. It's very very colorful, and I won't get into all the details here. You can easily find it. But the power of appearing and vanishing is illustrated here, is not just being able to appear and disappear in your body, but to make things that are hidden appear, or make other things that are manifest, to make them disappear. And as part of the Buddhist display of power, when he was standing at the top of the staircase, he opened up the vision of all the onlookers so they could see all the way up to heaven and all the way down to hell. And this is an example of the power of appearing and vanishing. There's the power of walking through walls or any solid object, which is done by mastery of the space kasina. It's said here. Some of these powers are specifically related to certain elemental kasinas, and if you master a kasina, then it's like external reality can be bent to your will. So with the space kasina, you see a solid wall and you say, let it be space, and it becomes like an opening for you, and you can walk through. Dives in and out of the ground. This is done by mastery of the water kasina. So the ground becomes like water that you can dive into. Flying through the air cross-legged. So this is sitting in a cross-legged position and levitating. There's a story in the biography of Ajahn Mun. He's talking about his teacher, Ajahn Sao, who would spontaneously levitate sometimes when he was in meditation. And the first time he did it, he became alarmed and lost his concentration and fell down and hurt his hip. And after that, he wondered whether he was hallucinating or not. So he prepared by putting a card of a piece of paper or something in the thatch of the ceiling out of reach. He had to climb on something and put it up there. And then when he thought he was levitating, he carefully opened his eyes without breaking his concentration and removed the paper. And then he proved to himself that he was actually doing it. Then there's the kind of strange one, is the power of touching with the hand the sun and the moon, those great mighty luminaries. And this is in part of the explanation of this is that one can change one's size, and there are a number of stories about this, where various powerful monks change their size. And he gives the illustrative story of the battle or confrontation between the mighty Naga Nandopananda and Moggallana. And Moggallana, this Naga had the power, of changing his size. Nagas naturally have powers of transformation. And the monks were going with the Buddha to Tawatingsa heaven for a visit. And this Naga became upset because they were traveling over his kingdom. So he tried to block their way by increasing his size to become so huge that with his hood, this cobra hood, he veiled the whole of Tawatingsa heaven. And Moggallana said, I can humble this snake. And he first made himself even bigger and it turned into a giant snake himself and covered, with his hood, covered over the snake and the mountain. And then he became really tiny and started walking up and down inside the Naga's ears and nostrils to annoy him. And there are various other displays of power, but these were the ones related to size changes. Then there's a bodily mastery as far as the Brahma world. That means being able to visit other realms, even as high as the Brahma world. Teleportation. This is described as disappearing here and reappearing somewhere else. And the Buddha actually did this on a number of occasions in the stories. One time the monks were traveling, and this is in the Mahaparinirvana Sutta. The monks were traveling from one place to another, and the river was in flood, and they couldn't get across. The Buddha just disappeared from the near shore and reappeared on the far shore. Transformation, we've already touched on this in another context, but it's the ability to shapeshift, to change your form into anything else. And the final one is the mind-made body, that is astral projection. So these are all given as examples. And the way it's phrased and described here, it doesn't sound like this is meant to be an exhaustive list, but as a bunch of examples of what kind of powers can arise from mastery of jhana. So I would recommend anybody wants to read this chapter. It's actually, I think, one of the more entertaining ones. Some of the chapters we're going to get into later are very dry and technical, but this one has a lot of interspersed stories, so it can be quite entertaining. And next week we're going to deal with a kind of a similar topic, the direct knowledges, which includes divine ear and recollection of past lives and divine eye and so on. So it's almost a continuation of this chapter. So I'll leave and I'll open up the chat and see what we got for questions. My computer's acting up. Okay, here we are. Just going to expand that so I can read it. I've seen a picture from a child at a Chinese Buddhist monastery where he was floating while meditating. Yeah, I'm not surprised. That probably is the type of thing you would see in a Chinese monastery. I don't recall any sutta where Sariputta possesses supernormal powers, but I often hear some monks say Sariputta also had supernormal powers just after Moggallana. Actually, that's incorrect. There's one story, and it's in the Udana, that directly contradicts that. It says that Sariputta was meditating beside the road, and a yaka came and hit him on the head with a club. But because of the depth of his concentration, he was unhurt. So I guess you could count that as a supernormal power, but it's technically it's the power of the jhana. It's not wielding a power. And Moggallana comes along and says, "How was your meditation?" He says, "It was good, except I just had a slight headache." And then he says, "Well, that's amazing that you were struck on the head by a yaka with a mighty iron club, and it just have a slight headache." Sariputta says, it's amazing that you can see yakas. I can't. I have no ability whatsoever to see even a wood elf. May we please talk about real stories or anecdotes you have seen or heard about? Yeah, well, I spent 5 years in Thailand, so I heard a lot of stories about various supernormal events. Which I can't vouch for the authenticity of any of them, but one of my favorites was that there was a Thai Air Force pilot who at a very high altitude, he saw a monk sitting cross-legged amongst the clouds, and he marked on his map with an X his location, and then when he was back on Earth, he drove out in his truck to that location, and it was in the hill country in a very remote place, and there was a little monastery there, and there was an old monk sitting in there, and he recognized the face was the same as the one in the clouds, and he asked him about it, but he just chuckled and refused to say anything about it. Do the suttas describe replacing lust, sensual pleasure with more innocent pleasure that arises from the breath feeling good? I've been hearing that a lot. Do you recommend this strategy? Well, the closest thing is that the Buddha described the pleasure arising from the jhanas as the blameless pleasure divorced from the senses. It's also said to be the sukha that arises from jhana is deeper than anything you can get through the senses. So it with some familiarity with these deeper states of meditation, the desire for sense pleasures in general wanes. Could you kindly clarify, as per Anguttara Force 170, where in the United States the 4 ways to arahanthood, the fourth way state to contemplate on the self and then to attain one-pointedness of mind, or is it to contemplate on no self, please? I'm not sure. I'd have to see that in context. I can think of again. I'd have to see it, and even I'd probably want to even look up the Pali. But say contemplate on the self. It could just mean bring your attention within. Hi, Ajahn. My understanding the state of neither perception or non-perception with the simile below. The young man, old man sitting in a room. The old man asks, "What are you doing?" The young man responds, "Watching the Ajahn give a discourse on YouTube." The old man says, "When he is finished, can you offer him a cup of tea?" "Sir, there is no Ajahn." Yes, that's actually not bad. There's 2 similes that are given. I think I dealt with them last week about the puddle of water and the oil in the bowl. Bhante, I remember vividly seeing faces during meditation once or twice in the past. Would this be due to a development of a supernormal power, albeit temporarily? There could be a number of possible explanations. One is that you're actually seeing the faces of spirit beings, probably petas. Another one is possibility that you're seeing images from your past life, perhaps your own face or those of close persons. The third is that there's no really deeper meaning. It's just a nimitta created by the mind without any real reference. Could you explain? Oh, I'm sorry, I lost track here. Can you explain here this? If it's easier to become Sotapanna as a Dhammanusari or a Sadhanusari versus becoming through insight or jhana the conventional way? I don't think there's contradiction there. A Dhammanusari and the Sadhanusari it's a classification of practitioners who rely either on the investigation of dhammas or on sada, faith. So it's like the intellectual road or the faith-based road. Both would require developing insight and jhana. It's not a alternative to those. Have you personally witnessed any display of such powers? Not really as such. I did see a village snake doctor curing a man of snake bite through the use of mantras, which I was very impressed by. I don't know if that would probably classify as the success through science. The Buddha famously cautioning against displaying psychic powers for worldly gain. In modern age, where desire for special status and power is so strong, what subtle attachments are dangerous? I think that the desire for special status and power was present in the Buddha's time just as much as ours. Just maybe a different means for it. Attachment to those things is a bhava tanha, the desire to be. So, in modern times, people try to become either, well-known, famous. Many people desire that, or powerful, to have authority over others. This is a different kind of desire, a different kind of tanha than sense desire. Sense desire, so like desire for great wealth, sense desire only accounts for a certain percentage of that. If you've already got enough money to satisfy all your sense desires and you're still seeking more wealth, then it becomes bhavana tanha, the desire to be. And you see that actually in many cases of wealthy people, they actually forego sense desires in order to devote more energy to attaining wealth. How much knowledge of Dhamma or faith do you need to be a Dhammanusari stream enter? I don't think knowledge is really, although knowledge can help, I don't think it's the primary characteristic of a Dhammanusari practitioner. It's like an intellectual curiosity. So observing the Dhammas and paying attention to the reality of the coming and going of objects in the mind. Does dreaming about Buddha meeting the Buddha have any significance in Theravada? I think it would have significance in any tradition. Probably if you dream of encountering a Buddha or any person you relate to as a teacher, my interpretation of that is it's your own inner wisdom is putting on that face and giving you a teaching. How does these powers distract from someone becoming an araya? It is a distraction because it's like a side path. It doesn't lead directly to enlightenment, and it's possible to be fully enlightened without any powers at all, and it's possible to have powers without being enlightened. It's a side path that's another seduction away from the true goal. How important, unimportant is developing these powers on the path? Fundamentally unimportant. like I just said it in regard to the other question, they're a side trip. Moggallana had psychic powers, but Sarah did not. Did Sariputta, however, the three powers of Buddha realized through the night of his awakening? Yeah, well, those are the three knowledges: the knowledge of his past lives, the knowledge of the rising and falling of beings, and the knowledge of the destruction of cankers. And these Sariputta would have these powers, but to a somewhat lesser degree. There is some passage in the commentaries that talks about, and I can't remember the numbers, but the Buddha can remember his past lives for any number of aeons that he chooses to look, whereas a great disciple like Moggallana or Sariputta can only remember their past lives for, I think it's like 100,000 aeons. And an ordinary arahant can, at the most, go back 1,000 aeons or something. I forget the numbers, but it's the point is it makes a distinction between the depth or the totality of the three knowledges in the case of the Buddha and of others. I am almost certain I once read in Gudara that Ananda said it is through craving for the destruction of the fetters that one releases themselves from them. Is that incorrect? I don't think he would have said would have been craving. It would probably have been I'm not that's not ringing a bell, that passage, but if he said craving, it's probably a translation for chanda, which could be translated to desire, but it's like the imperative in the mind to attain liberation. About seeing faces during meditation, I seem to recall I recognized some of them on myself, even though I didn't look like what I look now. So it could be your face in previous lifetimes. It's possible. Are there any techniques or methods to recall past lives after deep samadhi state? We're going to get into that somewhat next week, but the method that the method is to develop the memory more powerfully within this life, and then to keep pushing it back to the moment of birth, and then past birth to the womb state, and then past that to the previous life. So through constant proper practice, will these powers along with past lives start arising? Well, something like past life recollection often arises in a spontaneous way and a partial way. Like you might just get snatches of memory, like that one person here who said he saw faces in his meditation. It's possible, particularly in dreams, you might get little glimpses of what was going on in past lives. Does the experience of time in Nirodha Sampati the same as in a coma? You just black out when the 7 days has passed? I don't know if it's that's actually a good question, and I don't know if it's. I think it would have to distinguish between Nirodha Sampati and the state of asanya beings, the beings without any consciousness or perception, where it is like being in a coma. You black out and then wake up and there's no time has passed. I don't recall that ever being said about Nirodha Sampati. It's essentially an entry into nibbana, so it's timeless. There's no real sense of time. Would a certain point of knowledge allow the practitioner to leave the body, die at will? Yes, that's actually in the case of the Buddha. He released the life faculty, it said. And this is something that Indian yogis to this day still, exercise that power. It's when the body's already decrepit and they just say, oh, that's enough, and they just by their will make an end to it. The path can sometimes seem very daunting, and it is unclear if I'm making progress. I'm trying to observe that desire. Any advice? Yeah, just keep going and don't be attached to results. Just keep trying and just try to be in the present moment. Don't project into the future and look forward for results. I can remember being a couple of different people and being an ant, okay? Okay, so I think we'll leave that here for now. And next week, it's chapter number 13. It's other direct knowledges. So we're dealing with recollection of past lives, divine eye, and so on. So it looks like we had a decent connection this week. So the day was the internet was shining on us. And we'll see you next week.